Well, you know that game we play of Where's Simon Today? Simon today is in the dry. You may hear rain on that clear plastic roof shortly. I'm in the chaplaincy centre and I'm hiding from wind and rain, storm, flooded roads outside today. And I'd like to think this is the wise place to be, because what we're looking at today is James 3:13-18, and it's all about what is wise and what is not. You'll be surprised how James defines that. See, James opens this remarkable passage with a really provocative question. Who among you is wise and understanding? Everybody'd like to say they're wise, wouldn't they? And everybody in James's room, as he's writing this, they thought they knew exactly what he was talking about. They'd heard plenty of rabbis, plenty of maybe Greek philosophers, teachers. They understood the categories, or so they thought. The wise person was someone with knowledge, someone who could debate the Torah, someone who could answer the hard questions. At least give a credible answer. But James immediately starts to reframe the entire concept for them. And he's about to turn their understanding of what wisdom is completely on its head. See, when he's talking about wisdom, are you wise? James is not asking for a CV of theological knowledge. He's not looking for credentials or academic achievements. He's not looking for the guy who's managed to put somebody past somebody else in business. He's asking for something far more demanding. Visible, embodied wisdom. And he's going to tell us what that wisdom, surprisingly, actually looks like in the flesh. See, here's the thing. Biblical wisdom shows up dressed as the opposite of worldly wisdom. It shows up, says James, as a dedication to self-denying, humble, peacemaking living. That's not what you might expect, is it? Too many contemporary forms of wisdom in our churches and our academic institutions, even in our theological debates, they're actually just posing. They're a sort of desire to be clever, to be respected, to be seen as more insightful than the next person. It becomes wisdom as performance, wisdom as rivalry, wisdom as a contest for status, like some sort of intellectual arm wrestling. If you think that's a bit odd, go back and have a look at your social media. Go back and have a look at LinkedIn and see the posing that's going on there. So, James, okay, then how do you get on the right side of this? How do you cultivate the real thing? James tells us you put in place concrete practices by which a Christian community may together cultivate for one another what he calls the wisdom from above. Not the wisdom of this world, not the wisdom that climbs over others to reach the top, but the wisdom that descends like grace and takes root in meek hearts. So here's James's big claim in this passage, James 3:13-18. Try and hold on to this as we go through the text together. True wisdom, he's saying, is shown in meekness, that's strength restrained for a higher objective. And it produces peaceable, impartial fruit. And that fruit is the opposite of rivalry and envy and boasting, producing disorder and evil. So James 3:13-18 then is this compact unit with a beautifully clear three-phase structure, 3 steps. I'm going to outline it briefly so you can see where we're headed, and then we're going to head there. First, there's the challenge or test in verse 13. It's a provoking question. Who among you is wise and understanding? Let him show it by good life and works, by deeds done in the meekness of wisdom. See, James opens with a behavioural test for wisdom. Wisdom, James says, has got to be shown. It's a practical thing. The Greek verb is dexato, the same word used for displaying evidence in a courtroom. And it's not merely claimed, it's exhibited as wisdom. It's demonstrated, it's proved in the courtroom of daily life. Secondly, verses 14 to 16, you've got a diagnosis of the problem that they're facing in these churches James is writing to. He gives us a series of sharp opposites describing false wisdom, the kind that actually stems from inner, vice. And he talks about jealousy, zelos, selfish ambition, erytheia, boasting and lying. And he culminates in the devastating claim that such wisdom is not from above, but is earthly, natural, psychic, even demonic. Where envy and strife exist, James warns, disorder and every sort of evil practice follows. Then thirdly, there's the portrait of true wisdom and its outcome in verses 17 to 18. And there James gives us a positive catalogue of the wisdom that is from above, a beautiful cluster of virtues. It shows up in purity, in peaceableness, in gentleness, in reasonableness or willingness to yield, mercy, good fruits, impartiality, sincerity. That's how wisdom shows up, says James. And then he concludes the practical agricultural themed claim. Peacemakers who sow righteousness will reap a harvest of justice and peace. So the paragraph as a whole then moves from that initial test to negative diagnosis and then to positive reformation and social consequence. Complete moral vision in 6 verses. We're going to unpack it and it'll make more sense, hopefully. So the challenge then, first of all, verse 13. The English Standard Version goes like this, and it's quite a literal word-for-word translation. Who is wise and understanding among you? Let them show it by their good life, by deeds done in the humility that comes from wisdom. The New Living Translation puts it even more bluntly. If you are wise and understand God's ways, prove it by living an honourable life, doing good works with the humility that comes from wisdom. Prove it, says James. Show me. Demonstrate it. That Greek verb, dexato, we mentioned earlier on, it is that same word used for displaying evidence in court. Bring me the proof. You think you're wise? Bring me the proof. It's James's key imperative here. He's saying, in effect, produce the evidence. Exhibit your wisdom by the life that it leads you to lead. It's going to show up in the way you behave, he says. And it's not just a polite invitation, the way he puts it. It's a summons. Bring me the evidence, prove the case. James wants to see the receipts. And in this single verse, James redefines what it means to be wise and understanding. The Greek phrase is sophos kai epistemon, wise and understanding. In Greek culture, those words described philosophers, people of learning and rational reflection, people who could hold forth in the agora in a big crowd about virtue and truth. In Hebrew tradition, the wise were those who feared the Lord and lived skillfully in his world, navigating life with the discernment that comes from knowing his word and reverence for him. And what James seems to be doing is fusing the two traditions. Wisdom, he says, must be embodied in visible ethical conduct. Not enough to know things, you've got to live them through. And the tone of that living is going to be meekness, protes in the Greek, that gentle, disciplined strength that refuses to dominate, that doesn't need to win every argument, that can absorb insult without retaliating. So let's unpack what James means by those good works that stem from wisdom here then. These are ethical acts, good things to do that are public, that are communal, not merely private religion. This isn't about your personal prayer room, though that matters too, obviously. It's about how you treat your neighbour, how you speak in meetings, how you respond when someone disagrees with you, even has a go at you. Good works are the visible evidence, James is saying, that wisdom has taken root in your life. And then there's that word protes. Good works? Yep. Now protes. Gentleness or meekness. So easy to misunderstand this. Meekness is not weakness. It's not timidity or passivity or letting people walk all over you. No, it's controlled strength that comes from looking at the whole picture. It's the kind of power that could crush but chooses to bless. It's the strength that restrains the inbuilt urge to win or retaliate and instead chooses the luxury of being able to nurture and be generous and serve. True wisdom, James is saying, shows character, not cleverness. It's not self-projecting noise, but self-effacing nurture of somebody else. And it's maybe quiet, steady, not showy, and it's completely unmistakable when you see it in front of you. Let me kind of illustrate this with a story. Well, it's an old story, actually. It's about Abraham Lincoln. I think it captures perfectly what James means by the meekness of wisdom. You see, Lincoln was president, and his Secretary of War was a man named Edwin Stanton. Brilliant guy, intense, but openly scornful of Lincoln. And more than once, Stanton called him a fool. Once he said in public that Lincoln was the original gorilla. It was a bit of an insult in the time, I suppose. And that any explorer who wanted to see one didn't need to go to Africa. They could just visit the White House and see Lincoln the gorilla there. Well, everybody expected Lincoln to fire the man. Of course they did. He had every right to. But he didn't. Lincoln simply said, "If Stanton calls me that, there must be some reason for it. I'll try to learn what it is." Very gracious, you see. Wise. He kept Stanton on because he knew Stanton was good at his job and the country was at war and desperately needed his gifts. Lincoln didn't retaliate. He didn't answer insult with insult. It wouldn't have been wise. He stayed steady and gentle and focused on the work that mattered. Actually, you've got to be quite a strong guy to do that, haven't you? Strong on the inside to hold back when it was wise. And years later, when Lincoln was assassinated, it was Edwin Stanton who stood by his body in tears. And the man who'd once called him a fool whispered, "There lies the greatest leader of men the world has ever known." That's what James calls the meekness of wisdom. Not weakness, not silence born of fear, but a strength that doesn't need to win the argument. A wisdom that can absorb insults and continue to do good. A peaceable strength that leaves even its critics ultimately humbled. And that's the kind of wisdom that James is talking about in verse 13. A wisdom you can see in a life that is quietly good, humbly strong, and unmistakably drawing its daily wisdom from above. Well, there's the challenge, and that's what he's talking about when he's talking about wisdom. But the second stage in this passage, this argument that James is putting forward, deals with fake wisdom in verses 14 to 16. James now shifts gear. He loves the church, but he's no fantasist living in dewy-eyed denial about how it can go wrong. He knows that the Christian community, his and ours, can be affected with people who claim wisdom but live rivalry. And that's not because they're Christian. All Christians are nasty, but because they're human. All humans have got the capability to be pretty unpleasant. So you get this in all voluntary associations in human society. The enemy of souls counterfeits every good thing that can exist in a human personality, in human society. He fills the empty shell he's created, which looks fine from the outside, fills it with the biting hermit crab of malice. So being a realist, James addresses the issue head on because he knows that crab can come darting out suddenly and bite. Verse 14. If you harbour bitter envy and selfish ambition in your hearts. Do not boast about it or deny the truth, says James. Again, let's break down what James means here, because these terms are crucial. Firstly, he's talking about harbouring bitter jealousy. Now, the Greek phrase is zelon pikron, literally zealous bitterness. And that noun zelos can mean zeal in a good sense, passion, enthusiasm, commitment, but paired with the adjective pikros, meaning bitter, it becomes something toxic, the way James is using it in this passage. He's talking about a corrosive zeal, a zealous bitterness, the kind of passion that makes everything about me to be against you. It's competitive spirituality. It's the person who can't celebrate another's success because they're too busy resenting it. And secondly, then there's selfish ambition. James is using the Greek word erytheia. It's a fascinating term. In classical use, it referred to day labour working for pay, but over time it came to mean party spirit or factional politics, jockeying for position, manoeuvring for influence. By James's day, it described the service of a party spirit, feud, faction, that sort of thing. It's ambition that divides. It's cleverness weaponized for status or control rather than for service. Do you see that in the world around you? Well, maybe. Paul uses the same word in his lists of vices, 2 Corinthians 12:20, Galatians 5:20, Philippians 1:17, Philippians 2:3. It describes a contentious disposition. Go on Twitter and see it. A selfish ambition that disrupts community. Look at your politics and see what's happening there. And James says this, that sort of thing doesn't maybe look like outright evil, but it is self-promotion cloaked as principle. It's the person who says they're defending the truth when really they're defending their turf. Let me give you 3 quick examples of erytheia in action. One's ancient, one's biblical, and one is right now. First, Mark Antony. Remember him? When Julius Caesar was assassinated, human nature hasn't changed over the years. When Julius Caesar was assassinated, his ally Mark Antony seized the moment. And he stood up before the Roman crowd with Caesar's blood-stained cloak in his hands. And his voice trembled with emotion as he spoke. "Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears," the words Shakespeare puts in his mouth. And soon the people were weeping and raging, ready to burn down the city for revenge. See, it looked like loyalty that Mark Antony was showing. It sounded like love, but underneath it was calculation. Antony was not a grieving friend, he was a strategist. His eloquence was crafted not to heal the damaged republic, damaged by the murder of Caesar, not to heal the republic, but to claim it for himself. Seizing the moral high ground, but his motive was to seize power. And within months, we know, Rome was plunged into civil war. That's erytheia, brilliance poisoned by self-interest. Well, the second example I want to give you of erytheia, you'll find in 3 John, third letter of John, verse 9. And the example is a guy called Diotrephes. The Apostle John warns of this man named Diotrephes, who loves to be first. See, Diotrephes is in the church that John was writing to, and he's not an obvious villain. He's probably articulate, influential. Perhaps he even is thought of as being morally upright in many respects. He claims to protect the church from false teaching or whatever it is, but in doing so, he rejects apostolic authority. He silences other voices. He expels anyone who challenges his control from the church. John doesn't accuse him of heresy. only of erytheia, self-seeking ambition disguised as zeal for the truth. Diotrephes' problem isn't doctrine, it's ego. He loves preeminence more than peace. He loves to be first. And in that small community, his spirit produces exactly what James describes, unwisdom. And you can see it in the division and the suspicion and the rivalry it gives birth to. Diotrephes shows that erytheia isn't just for politicians. It can live in church life, cloaked in good intentions and righteous talk. It's the spirit that says, I'm the one defending the truth, and projects that image. When in reality, it's defending the self. And third, erytheia today? Well, look at the virtue wars we see all around us. That ancient word, erytheia, has found a new stage in the digital world. We live in an age of competitive righteousness, where public moral display often matters more than quiet moral integrity, and putting the other guy down for being a bad guy is the thing it feeds on. So social media gets designed to amplify attention and becomes a theatre of erytheia. You see it in the way moral debate becomes performance. Instead of conversation, we get contests. Who can sound the most indignant? Who can sound the most compassionate? Who can sound the most prophetic? Rory Stewart, remember him? The British ex-politician, I guess, and podcaster. He was interviewed night before last on Newsnight, and he spoke about how outrage has become a form of currency in our politics, multiplying grievance in people's minds to garner popularity, looking for things that can be pointed at to make the other person look bad in order to make yourself look good. And he identified these phenomena as features of modern life, leading beyond populism to the destruction of the tolerance that is a foundation of democracy. What's he getting at? We seem to live in a world and experience of politics where a person standing in their tribe depends on how loudly they can denounce, how perfectly they can phrase their solidarity, how quickly they can condemn. And it's not limited to any ideology. It happens amongst progressive people and conservative people and Christians alike. A company suddenly discovers a conscience when the market rewards that conscience. A social media influencer posts about humility, complete with lighting and hashtags and affiliate links. A church faction champions truth against compromise, all in inverted commas, not to build up the body, but to win an internal war in the church. Or a rural community member defends the old ways with such bitterness that the defense itself destroys what was good in them, those old ways. See, all these are forms of erytheia, self-serving ambition clothed in moral conviction. It's the ancient sin of seeking honour under the guise, rather than living in the reality, of righteousness. That's erytheia. Mind you, not stupidity, but brilliance poisoned by self-interest. Not evil that looks ugly, but ambition that looks noble. James would have recognized it instantly. Earthly, unspiritual, demonic wisdom, clever in speech, hollow in motive, leaving only, he says, disorder and every vile practice in its wake. The opposite of wisdom. James's next move is diagnostic. Verse 15. This wisdom is not from above, but is earthly, unspiritual, demonic. Oh, it looks clever perhaps, but look where it's coming from, he says in verse 15. Uk estin anothen, not from above, absolutely decisive comment. So he's classifying false wisdom not by its intellectual content, but its spiritual origin. Oh, there is wisdom from above, he's going to say. Divine, gracious, peaceable. And there is wisdom that comes from below. And James is going to pile up now 3 adjectives in a descending sequence that traces the spiritual degradation of this counterfeit wisdom that is not from above, but from below. Firstly, he says it's earthly, epigeos, literally on the earth. Describes a mindset confined to visible, material horizons, the earth to which the evil one has been cast down, out of heaven, Scripture tells us. It measures success by tangible outcomes. Of course, that's the way the world works. Influence, profit, reputation, rather than by obedience to God and reputation with Him. Its parameters are pragmatic, not theological. It's the kind of reasoning that dominates politics, marketing, and self-advancement. What seems to work, not what's right. It's earthly. Secondly, it's unspiritual. Psychike, it's a term that's subtler and darker than earthly. It comes from psyche, meaning soul or life principle. It describes that which belongs merely to the natural human self, though. The life animated by desire and emotion, but not yet transformed by the Spirit of God. Paul uses the same term in 1 Corinthians 2:14. He says, the natural person does not receive the things of the Spirit of God. So psychike wisdom is driven by instinct and appetite. It's emotional intelligence without moral discernment. Clever, but self-referential. Humanistic, but spiritually tone deaf. And it reflects the psychology of fallen humanity, operating from impulse and fear and competition rather than divine wisdom. Thirdly, he says, the third thing that characterizes this false wisdom, it is demonic. Daimoniodes. It's a final adjective that completes the descent. What began as merely earthly has become unspiritual and demonic. Not simply wrong, but opposed to God's purposes. That's what he's getting at here. Now, it's an adjective that only occurs here in the New Testament, and its rarity underlines its punch. James suggesting that the moral logic of hell is this. Once wisdom turns inward on itself, feeding envy, self-promotion and rivalry, that human origin, false wisdom, becomes an instrument of the enemy of souls. The demonic is not confined to overt evil. It shows up wherever truth is used as a weapon rather than as a light. This is wisdom, in inverted commas, whose end is destruction. A parody of divine intelligence that mirrors the serpent's cunning in Genesis 3. And the result? Here comes the result, verse 16. James reasons. For where jealousy and selfish ambition exist, there is disorder and every vile practice. That Greek noun, akatastasia, sometimes rendered disorder or chaos. It speaks of social and moral breakdown, the collapse of a society, the collapse of communal coherence. And in classical use, it described political unrest, insurrection, instability. And you look at your world, and so many people are saying to us at the moment, our society is coming apart. There you go. That's that then. In the Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Hebrew Old Testament, it often marks the absence of divine order or peace. And that root stasis means standing or stability. Akatastasia is literally non-standing, things falling apart. So James is saying the fruit of this false wisdom is self-seeking ambition reigns in that context. And everything comes apart, disintegrates. Families, churches, societies. It's not mere disagreement with one another. It's structural fragmentation. The opposite of the divinely ordered peace that heavenly wisdom produces. Do you know that phrase? Strong phrase, isn't it? Every vile practice. Now that term describes what is base, what is worthless, or corrupt, in human conduct. Conduct that looks expedient, but is empty of virtue. In short, James outlines a moral inversion. What begins as cleverness from below ends as chaos from beneath. Do you see what he says there? Clever, isn't it? What appears sophisticated turns out to be spiritually shallow. What calls itself wisdom ends up aligning with the purposes of demonic logic, of pride, of rivalry, and everything coming to bits. Well, James's analysis is devastatingly apt. Where that spirit rules, where that false wisdom takes hold, there is disorder and every vile practice. My friends, look at your world. Look at what's going on. Ask yourself, you don't need me to tell you, ask yourself whether this fits what you see or not. There's a good bit coming up. Isn't that a mercy? Because thirdly, you see, here's the third part of this cleverly put together passage of scripture. Thirdly, James is now going to describe wisdom from above. He's risen the challenge, he's diagnosed the false wisdom, and now he talks about wisdom from above in verses 17 and 18. He paints the true portrait. Verse 17, but the wisdom from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, open to reason, full of mercy and good fruits, impartial and sincere. Well, those are all wonderful, sweet things to put in the trifle, James, stir it all up together. What a wonderful, sweet description. Let's unpack it again. He's adopting a vertical contrast. Wisdom from below was like we've just seen. Wisdom from above, anothen, versus wisdom from below is so very different. True wisdom, he says, is of divine descent. It issues from God's own nature and God's own character. By contrast, the false kind doesn't merely lack divine insight, it originates from a different place entirely, reflecting not heaven's order, but the world's distortion of something good that you receive from God when you ask for it, says James. And James lists 8 qualities of this coming down from above, coming from God wisdom. Let me take you through them. I'll be quick because there's 8 of them. You're going to have to get through it. First, pure, he says. This wisdom is pure. Its motive is clean, not self-serving, you see. It's purity of intention, the singleness of heart that seeks God's glory, not your own. It's pure. Secondly, it's peaceable. Irenike. It aims for reconciliation, not victory. It doesn't pick fights or escalate conflicts. It actively seeks to heal and to restore, because that's a wise thing to want. And thirdly, in achieving that, it's gentle, epiikes. It's a word that means considerate and forbearing and slow to offend. It's the person who gives others the benefit of the doubt, who doesn't take offense easily. Remember Abraham Lincoln? Fourthly, he says it's open to reason. Eupathes, literally open to persuasion. Ready to listen. I suppose you could call it humility in intellectual form, the willingness to change your mind when you're shown something better. Fifth, says James, this wisdom that comes from above is full of mercy and good fruits. Compassion translated into action. Not just feeling sorry for people, but actually stepping up, helping them, serving them, doing them good. That's the wise way to live in this world, says James. What else is it, this wisdom that's from above? It's impartial. Adiakratos, without favoritism or double standards. It's the justice that treats rich and poor, powerful and weak, insider and outsider with the same fairness, because that's the way to a better world. It's wise. And seventhly, it is sincere. Anupokritos, without hypocrisy or performance. Not a bit like LinkedIn and so many other social media channels, is it? It's authenticity, the absence of pretense, saying what you mean and meaning what you say, and being genuine. Each term carries a communal weight here, each of these 8. This is wisdom that builds community. Not by being clever, but by being kinder, cleaner, fairer, freer from ego. True wisdom, by contrast to the earthly kind, does not compete for moral visibility. It's peaceable, gentle, open to reason, full of mercy and good fruit. It doesn't need applause to act rightly. It wins by yielding. It convinces by being consistent. And it shines quietly. Why make a fuss? It's rooted in the truth. And then finally comes the image that completes the picture. Verse 18. It shows itself, this wisdom, like this: a harvest of righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace. Harvest of righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace. James ends with agriculture in an age when people live far closer to the agricultural process than most people in our time. Peacemakers don't just enjoy peace, they sow it, he says. The community that lives out heavenly wisdom plants the seeds of righteousness in every relationship. And over time, that sort of wisdom reaps a harvest of peace. No harvest is instantaneous. It's seasonal. You have to be patient. That's agriculture. You sow in one season, you reap in another, but the harvest is there, where wisdom from above is practiced. Peace and righteousness grow. Where the other kind, the false wisdom from below, reigns, chaos and corruption spread. And that's the word James presses upon his hearers and upon us. Real wisdom does not demand to be seen as wise. It simply is wise. And time reveals its fruit. My friends, here's the application to us, really. We need to learn to sow peace. Translate this to our world, to our meetings, to our ministries, to our digital spaces. Where do we see wisdom that is earthly, unspiritual, and demonic in origin? It's in the academic who is determined to bludgeon people to win arguments but leaves bitterness behind. It's in the minister who always needs the last word in every conversation. It's in the online preacher whose truth burns but doesn't heal. And it's in the quieter rivalries of everyday Christian life. The jealousy over another one's influence, the subtle delight in a brother's or sister's failure, the resentment when others don't recognize our work. James characterizes that as demonic. Not because it's spectacularly evil, but because it reverses the character of heaven and opposes all that our God stands to do. So how do we cultivate wisdom from above? Not by clever study, but by cultivating meekness. And that, my friend, that is my word for the week. I hope it's been of interest. I hope it's helpful. If you felt it was helpful, please feel free to like and subscribe and all those things, or leave a little comment. That's always welcome. And if I can be of any help to you, please feel free to reach out to me in comments below or through social media, where you'll find me very easily. I'd love to be able to pray for you if there's something going on in your life that you want to share. But until next time, I'm going to say, thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for coming with me through this, I think, fascinating thing that James is saying to us here in James chapter 3. I hope you have a really very good week.